Hi, Lizzy. Thank you so much for joining me today. Just for anybody that doesn't know who you are you able to give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and for telling this story. This is a really important story and affects a lot of people in our human rights. I am a mother of 3, Columbia University Nursing School graduate. In May of last year, I found out my husband was a pedophile. He went missing. He then tried to have me taken against my will. And when that didn't work, my husband, who's a Brian Stryker Weinstein, he's a partner at Davis Polk and Wardwell, then went and got a bogus judicial order. And I say bogus because there was no factual merit basis for it. Had me evicted from my home, taken away from the children, and the children were then forced to be under his care while he was missing and under a pedophilia investigation. So he, by the police and by the cops, was just foisted back on my 3 children. That happened on June 5th, 2020. Since that time, I've been speaking out about pedophilia, about the judicial corruption, and about these issues with these COVID human rights atrocities that are happening. And I've just been completely pummeled by other lawyers, cops, and police, and judges for speaking out. Then on January 4th, I went to file some documents in my town to highlight the corruption and the fact that I wasn't able to get my FOIA, which is my Freedom of Information Act request from the town. The town didn't want to take my forms, so they called the police. The police came up and they arrested me. They used this guise of not wearing a mask as the reason for the arrest. And I've got the whole video up on my site. I say this all the time. I never want people to believe my story. I want them to look at the truth and see what's happening. So I was then falsely imprisoned. I was put into solitary confinement for 5 days without ever having seen a judge, without being allowed access to a lawyer, and without an arraignment. And this is in New York, in the United States of America. The judge then remanded me there the following day, remanded me there for 7 weeks. 7 weeks in solitary confinement. I was able to get myself out. When I did, it was by this other corrupt judge released me. They held a bail hearing for me where misdemeanors don't require bail, and said basically, if you don't participate in these psychiatric evaluations and you don't maintain an order of protection against the town, so you can't come to the town anymore. And if you do either of those 2 things, we're going to haul you back to jail. It was all it was ridiculous.
I've actually watched a lot of your story play out, and it's been incredibly surreal, and I can't imagine how surreal it's been for you living it. Because I've seen arrests, I've seen you put in solitary confinement, I've seen you being put into a psychiatric ward, and you're still coming back every time fighting. And I really commend you, because a lot of people would have cracked by now. You're a very, very strong woman. I just want to take it right back to the beginning and just understand the situation around your family and your family life. How did Brian's paedophilia come to light?
Well, Brian has a lifelong history of pedophilia. He had an issue with, as a child, he was given to this, he was a vice principal who took in troubled boys, and he was a known alcoholic who had been sent away on many different, recovery programs, and was still being hired back by the school as a vice principal. And he was gay and would take in, although married, would take in these troubled boys, would take them away on weekend trips with other adult men, and get the boys drunk and climb into bed with them. So Brian was one of Mr. Barry's boys. And Brian's parents not only sent Brian away with this pedophile, but Brian's sister was also molested by a pedophile, and also a teacher at the school. And Brian's parents encouraged the practice and sent their children back with them. So Brian's had this lifelong history of it. He's also, after identifying this man as a pedophile, still kept this guy's love letters from an adult male to a teenage boy for Brian's whole life. Now, Brian He went to Duke as an AB scholar. He went to Yale Law School. He's a partner at Davis Polk, one of the top 5 law firms in the world. And yet here he was condoning and supporting his pedophile. You know, of course, in my mind, you don't think that the man that you're having sex with is getting sexual gratification from children. So the way that I made his hero worship of his pedophile make sense to me was to say, well, my husband just has Stockholm syndrome, and he's just identification with the abuser, and he just doesn't want to face his own abuse. So my husband, when Mr. Barry actually, even after my husband identified this man as a pedophile, and he's a grown man in his 30s, when Mr. Barry retired, Brian went and spoke at Mr. Barry's retirement party as a keynote speaker, and said that this was one of the greatest men that ever lived. I mean, it's just, it gets sick, okay?
Right.
So I don't want to go into all the details about my family, because I'll tell you why. I'm just very candid about this. I have given the police very specific details. I've given videos, and everything that I've given to them, they then destroy. So Brian's been farming me for all the evidence to be like, what do you have on me? What's there? And I've been very cautious to say his pedophilia is self-evident, and he's got a lifelong history of it. And it all came to light in May 2020, and I confronted him about it, and my children and I sat down and talked with him about it. And those videos of me confronting him are actually online as well.
And he actually admits, doesn't he, to having an issue with pedophilia, and you have some text messages between yourself and Brian.
Correct. What happened was it started, the gaslighting, the heavy gaslighting started when I think my husband first started acting on his urges with our children. I would catch him grooming our children. Like he would walk in on the shower. When he'd be like, oh, where is, one of the kids? And I said, don't go in there. She's getting changed. And he literally would walk in the room after hearing that. And I would pull him out by the back of the scruff, and I'd be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he's like, oh, sorry. I forgot you told me that I shouldn't walk in there when they're getting changed. Like, give me a break. But in my mind, again, like, this is a Yale Law School graduate. I've been married to this man. Like, this was in 2011 when, I started really noticing his activity against the kids. But again, I didn't say he's grooming my children. What I said is, oh, this happened to him as a child. So he just doesn't know that it's wrong.
Right.
True, but not the whole truth. But
Right.
That is the willful blindness that you have. I never even stopped and asked myself the question. I never even stopped and said, wait a minute, is it possible he also could be getting sexual gratification? Is it possible that he's defending the pedophile and everything that he does, and defending his abuser, and defending the schools? So when my children were put on a pedophile phishing website by the school in 2013, by Hackley School, which is one of the top 25 schools in all of the US for high school, right? My husband, instead of defending our children, defended the school, and then tried to make me think that there was something wrong with me for sticking up for my kids and saying, listen, the school just needs to notify the other parents that this website is out there and that they were on it during school time, and that this is disseminating, because this website poses to be a safe child play space, and instead has these backroom chat rooms where it encourages the children to disclose pictures, their names, videos, and the more evidence that the children gives about themselves, the more they get these movie star points, and the more popular they become. So of course, when I found this out as a mother, I start advocating against it. And I'm going to the FBI to try and get this website taken down. I'm going to the Federal Trade Commission to try and get this website down. And my husband, who is a Yale Law School grad, is not coming with me. And instead, he's like, I'll set up the meeting for you with the FBI agents that I know that are in Child Protective Services. But you're crazy. But you need to stop advocating. But and again, why didn't I put the puzzle pieces together then? Why didn't I say, because the Stockholm Syndrome fit my needs? My husband isn't a pedophile. My husband was just abused, and he doesn't want to come to the FBI agents because it'll bring up too much of his own shit. You understand?
Right. So you were constantly making excuses for his, his strange behavior.
His grooming. I mean, like, my son would throw up every time my husband would come home from dinner. My son would throw up. He would be so upset. And my husband was like, oh, he's got a food allergy. He's got a food allergy. And like, I'm a Columbia University trained nurse. And yet I adopted that mentality, right? And then my son would scream at me as I would be like, stop throwing up, stop making yourself throw up because you don't like the food. I mean, it's like, it's horrific to think about. My son's being molested by my husband. My son is having these outcries to try and get attention. And then the one person who's supposed to protect him is instead not understanding what's going on and instead yelling at him, stop throwing up. Why are you throwing up? Because we live in a society where we are indoctrinated to accept these mentalities that this is just part of normal childhood behavior. Right? Like when a kid feels depressed, when a kid starts not taking care of himself, not washing his face, won't brush his teeth, is suddenly feeling like he goes from being happy in school to feeling like something's wrong. We're like, oh, that's normal adolescent behavior.
Yeah.
No, we need to consider that there is something privately happening to them that we're not aware of. So my poor son was out crying for help. And I didn't understand it. And then he would say, Mommy, can we have a private talk tonight? And I'd be like, of course, buddy. And he'd be in his bed and I would sit like at his bedside and I'd be like, what's going on? And he'd start opening up. And then my husband would come running in the room and throw open the door and stand there with his arms crossed and be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Huh, Max? What are you talking about? And I'd be like, Brian, get out. Get out. We are having a talk. And he's like, no, my son too. I get to know what you're talking about, Max. You can't have any conversations without me hearing, Max. And then we'd sit down on the couch.
Right.
And like, again, I made that make sense because I was like, oh, he's feeling left out because Max wants to talk to me and not to his father. And he didn't have a good relationship with his father.
Yeah.
So he's trying to impose himself on this one. Like,
yeah,
we create these, these delusions in our own mind as to why things make sense. Instead of considering all the possibilities, I never considered that my husband was actually a pedophile until I found things on his iPad that showed me that he was on these sites that resonated with all of the history, and suddenly my entire life made sense. Suddenly, every single thing fell into place. And I could have one consistent reason why everything was happening instead of grabbing at straws in every different way to try and make excuses for what was going on. But I guess
at the same time as everything all making sense, and your world also crumbling down at the same time. So everything fits, but it's also just falling apart.
Well, it's interesting because I think that's an important concept to hold on to. It's not that your world is falling apart. It's all of the falsities fall away. Mm-hmm. But the falsities, we have to identify as falsities because so many of us associate those falsities as the truth. So when the falsities stand away and you are left as a pillar of strength standing in your truth, okay, and you become just solidified and grounded in that, you have to let go. You have to appropriately attribute these things as being false.
You have to be able to let yourself let go of it and really accept the truth, and then stand in it.
Yes. So all these people that I thought were supporting me when they disappeared, if I valued them more than I valued the truth, then I would be in a weak position. I wouldn't understand what was going on. But because it then solidified everything you knew to be true, then everything made sense. The truth then protects you. And then you can see that you can devalue the things that you used to have false value for, right? So, I come from a family. My father was a pedophile, and I thought that I married so much different than my father. But you don't. You keep getting into the same circumstances in your life until you deal with it, right? So I didn't fully confront the issue with my father. So then I just married another pedophile, but a smarter one who could hide it better. And that's also part of the pedophilia that we have to understand. There's this great article. It's called In Plain View. It was written by Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell wrote Tipping Point, Outliers. He's a New Yorker author, you know, New York Times, whatever accolades you want to give to them. Not that those things really mean anything, but he writes this really poignant article about Jerry Sandusky. And it's about how pedophiles get away with it in plain view. They hide in plain view. And the trickery of the adults is just as alluring to them as a sexual gratification from children, okay? They need to fool the adults. They need to have the adults comply, and they need to groom the adults in the same way that they're grooming the children. And I go back to that all the time, like, what a fucking conquest I was for my husband, because here I was as an outspoken advocate against pedophilia. I used to get a list of all the sexual predators in the area that I was going to move to before I moved there. And I did it since college, right? I did it since college. And so here I am talking about pedophilia, advocating against pedophilia, like being this strong at telling my children all the time, you can tell me anything and I'll believe you. You know that, right? I will always believe you. I will always defend you. And underneath my nose.
Right. So, Lizzy, when you first realized that Brian had an issue with pedophilia, what was your first move?
Well, my first thing that I did was I went to who I thought was a trusted psychologist, this guy by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Dyke, who Brian had been bringing me to for marriage counseling services for years. And I told him, I gave him some of the evidence, and I said, you know, we need to help Brian. And I want to learn how to talk to Brian about this stuff safely without sending Brian over the edge.
Yeah.
And I had some concerns about this guy along the way. Like, he had done some really weird, bizarre things during these, like, again, marriage counseling sessions where he brought up Brian's abuser and was like, yeah, but Lizzy, can't you see that that gentleman really helped Brian? Can't you see the value in him? And I was like, no, Brian deserved to be helped without somebody taking advantage of them physically and sexually. No, that's disgusting. So maybe there's help, but Brian shouldn't, there's not a barter. There shouldn't have been a trade. And that guy, I mean, it was disgusting. And the fact that his parents condoned it is disgusting. But so there were little slivers of doubt in our marriage counseling sessions that this guy would lay that were supportive of pedophilia. But again, like, I was, you know, I would brush it off as something. But that was the first thing I did, because I knew that Brian trusted that guy. So I thought, let me go to somebody who Brian trusts and ask for information about how to talk to Brian about this safely without freaking him out. And I asked for Brian to leave the house. I said, I'm not comfortable with you here anymore. I know what you're doing. I see that you're gaslighting me, which we've been talking about for years, but now this is getting, like, out of control, and I need you to give us some space. So yeah, Brian did. Then I started talking to my kids, who started disclosing, and I text Brian and I said, thank you for being brave enough to give us our space. And the kids are really opening up. So I need you to just stay away another day. And then I see on the Find My iPhone, as soon as Brian got that text, he left from where he was and started driving home. And I was like, calling him, what are you doing coming home? Don't come home. I'm telling you that the kids are actually doing well with you not here, and we're healing them. What are you doing? And then he's like, he would leave a text message, hey, I'm driving. I can't answer the phone. I'm on my way home. And I was like, no, motherfucker, like, I see what you're doing. So anyways, then that night, that was May 20th, we sat down with the kids and Brian with that article by Malcolm Gladwell. And I had the kids and Brian read the article, and we sat down and talked to the kids and Brian about Brian's lifelong indoctrination into pedophilia, about what happened to him as a child, why his experiences then made sense for what he was doing as an adult, because not only were the children put on a pedophile phishing website at their school, at Hackley School in 2013, but my children had an issue with a pedophile at their camp, where the FBI came and raided the camp and took this pedophile out. And this guy had molested 5 kids in 8 days, all under the age of 8. Okay? And my husband protected the camp. Okay? And again, Yale Law School grad, Davis Polk partner. And in every single chance an issue pops up about pedophilia, my husband twists it around, protects the pedophile, and then tries to diminish the people and discredit the people who are advocating for protecting the children. So we were saying, see guys, so all this time when your dad didn't stick up for you, it's not because you don't have value. It's not because what you were talking about, wasn't true. It's not because you didn't deserve to be protected. This is why this man subscribes to pedophilia. This man is indoctrinated into the practice. He finds the love between an adult and a child to be a socially acceptable form of love. And he received and traded love with his abuser for his entire life.
Right.
So this explains your father's activities, and it has nothing to do with you. Okay. So after that, my husband had this kind of awakening moment, and he acknowledged that he was indoctrinated. He acknowledged that he wanted it to stop. And I sat down and I confronted him and I said, listen, you just can't hurt us anymore. We will help you, but you cannot hurt us anymore. You can't gaslight me. You can't fucking hurt the kids. Done. That part of your life is over. You want to get better, we'll help you get better. But it's not going to happen by deception. It's not going to happen by lying. And it's going to be an open, transparent process where you own your shit and we move on to a better place, whatever that place might look like. So I had that conversation with my husband on the early morning of May 21st. That was, I believe, a Friday. No, I'm going to say the day wrong. So I don't want to say the actual dates. But it was May 21st. So what happened was we went to bed at 10:30 that night. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning with a pit in my stomach. I went downstairs to talk to my husband because before he went to bed, he was trapping the kids all over the house and acting weird and bizarre and scary. So I was like, get up and go talk to him. So I went up, and that whole video was recorded, and that's also on my Facebook and Instagram pages. So that happened on May 21st. And then at 8 o'clock, and then he said, okay, we'll talk about this more in the morning. I need my rest. I said, great. Then at 8:30 in the morning, the next day, he wakes up and he's aggressively pushing his way out of the house. And I'm trying to stop him. And I'm like, Brian, please don't do this. Please stop and help us cope. Please stop and help you. Let's work this through as a family. And he grabs me and he pushes me aside and he says, you're going to ruin them, and leaves the house. Now, instantly, within minutes, he's texting with Jeffrey Dyke, that psychologist, the marriage counselor, about how to get me falsely committed to a mental institution. And they're laying this thing oh, yeah, she's clear and linear, and obviously she's not a threat to herself or others, but we're going to call the police, and they're going to come and take her away and bring her to a mental institution. And then me, a PhD psychologist, is going to come to the hospital, and I'm going to consult on all her care. I mean, it is bizarre. Right. It is, and this guy's a Yale Law School grad. Do you understand? So I have all these texts because I had my husband's iPad. Okay, so he leaves the house. I get a phone call from Jeffrey Dyke saying, you need to get on the FaceTime with us now. We go to get on the FaceTime. My husband can't get on. And Jeffrey Dyke, I said, Dyke, you're acting weird and you're protecting a pedophile. And he's like, you listen to me right now. The police are going to come pick you up, and you have to go, and you should trust me. You should trust me because I'm trustworthy, and you've trusted me all these years. So that means you must be right, and I'm trustworthy. So you should trust me and go with the police, Lizzy, okay? And I was like, no, asshole, what are you, psycho? And I'm like, absolutely not. You are not in control of me. You're acting bizarre. Jeff ends the call, then we have this text exchange with Brian, where I tell Brian what just happened. I said, you guys are trying to put me in a psychiatric facility because I discovered your pedophilia, Brian? What are you doing? What are you doing? And then Brian writes these gaslighting texts. Well, Jeff has an opinion, which I don't believe in, but if I did believe in it, it's okay for him to have his opinion. And he goes through this rambling gaslighting, which is awesome for people to read, because I want you to understand, like, people think that narcissists and gaslighters are just like the evil, manipulative people all the time, and they're evil and manipulative. But their poison is their niceness. Their poison is their ability to mix in love with arsenic. Love with arsenic. So you don't know which one to believe. So and just try and get you to not know what the real truth of the situation is. So you just hold on to the side of that person that you want, which of course is a loving person, right?
Right.
We had this whole text exchange,
which a lot of you have that evidence posted on your social media, don't you? So this is available for everybody to go and look at for themselves, to make up their own mind on how these people have behaved. But once you put all of the string of events together, it just becomes so surreal, and it's undeniable. It's undeniable.
That's the thing. The evidence speaks for itself. The evidence of all this speaks for itself. So what happened was Brian tried to have me taken against my will by Jeff Dyke by calling the police. I called them both out on it. We then fired Jeff Dyke. We both fired them. Then Brian acknowledges that he was working with Jeff maliciously and nefariously to hurt me and try and take me away from the children. And that's also in writing, also posted. Okay, so then he agrees that he's going to stay away from children. He agrees that he's been indoctrinated into pedophilia, that he wants to get better. He's going to stay away from children, and he's going to stay at a hotel that night. Okay, and all of that's in writing. I then go to the hotel to try and bring him clothing. Like, I think I'm being a good mom, a good mom to my children and a good wife to him. I'm like packing his favorite boxers. I'm getting his favorite poetry book involved. I'm like packing up all his favorite things, and I bring it to the hotel. And then once I get there, and again, this was all set up by Brian, but when you don't play in these worlds and you're a trusting, good, loving person, it takes you out of the knees when it happens.
Yeah.
So I got there and I asked Brian to give me his phone so I can look through his phone for all the evidence of what he's been doing with Jeffrey Dyke. Now, I already have the evidence on the iPad, but I wanted to compare it, right? And Brian gives me his phone and then freaks out and starts going, police, police, call the police, she's got my phone. And the lady behind the counter calls the police. So then I pull out my phone and I film the interaction. And again, all posted online. Yeah. And it's me saying, why are you calling the police? You know that these are police. This is now May of 2020. You know the police in this town are super aggressive, Brian. And these are the people who were trying to arrest me when I was walking outside not wearing a mask. And this is like, now that's not so unusual, but in last year that was weird, right? So I was like, why are you calling the police? And then you could hear the gaslighting. I didn't call the police. You called the police. No, you wanted me to call the police. No, that woman called the police. And I was like, man, we see you enough. And then he tells her, okay, don't call the police. Everything's settled. And I said, just so you know, and the women had been overhearing the conversation about the pedophilia and about all the issues. So I wasn't going to lie and I said, I'm not going to lie for you when they come. Yes. Because I'm not going to ruin my integrity to try and protect you. You did this. You called the police on us. You brought this into us, right? So we sit down. I go through his phone, and I see that he's deleted every single communication with Jeffrey Dyke and any other quote-unquote doctor that he's been trying to bring people to, because this is what he does. He's got this sick and sadistic form of narcissistic control where he brings you to psychiatrists or psychologists under the guise of, he needs help. And can you please just go with him? Because he really just, he can't go alone. And please just come with me to help me, to make me stronger. You're a good wife. You're a good mother. You would do that. And then you get there and these are people that he pays, and they try and give you false diagnoses, and they try and like gaslight you, right? So that started happening in 2013 when when I first started heavily advocating against pedophilia in our family. It was when the website and Miss Murray Jones, who was the computer teacher at my children's school at Hackley School in Tarrytown, New York, put the children on this pedophile phishing website. Okay. My husband came out and protected the school.
So it was actually the school that initiated the wow.
Exactly. Now, my husband started freaking out. I now know in 2020, it's because he's been on that pedophile phishing website. That's one of the places that he uses. But I didn't know that at the time. Again, I just thought he was being indoctrinated and freaking out. So in 2013, he was like, "You're crazy. You're bipolar. And so you need to get help." And I'm like, I'm not bipolar. I'm the same person all the time. I'm never depressed. I'm always loud. I'm always late. I'm always cursing. I'm always advocating. But I'm like, I'm not bipolar. I'm always predictable, right? Mm-hmm. And so after 4 months of him doing this, he then was using that same line, "Please come with me. I need help. Will you come with me to help me?" And he brought me to this woman, Catherine Michaels. Now, Catherine Michaels is a psychiatrist out of Scarsdale, New York. And we walked in there, and Catherine Michaels, under the guise of like, I was just going to prove to Brian that I was fine. And that's the burden of proof. That's the fucked up thing. They're trying to switch the burden of proof to, I can make false and baseless accusations, and you have to prove it's not true, as opposed to the person making the allegations has to have evidence and proof to prove their allegations. You understand?
Yes.
So this idea of, well, if you weren't crazy, why wouldn't you go? Why would you go? And when you are a Columbia University trained nurse who is very firm that nothing's wrong with you, and that your husband, you think, is just acting out in crisis because he's got Stockholm syndrome, you're like, fine, mofo.
I'll prove my point, yeah.
I'll prove my point. Don't do it. Don't do it. That is the slippery slope. It is a playbook. It is a narcissistic pedophile playbook. It's a playbook for narcissists. It's a playbook for pedophiles. It is a form of control.
Yeah.
When they give you false and baseless accusations, and then you have to go and prove yourself from it, they then procure people behind the scenes. But you don't live in those worlds. So you don't think about those kind of things.
Yeah, because you don't expect that to happen. You expect for, the system to work in the favor of the victims.
Or not in the favor of the victims, but authentically.
Authentically and with integrity and morale, yeah.
Exactly. And they're not. They are financially procured systems used to manipulate and control people. And it's not one bad doctor or it's most of the doctors.
The network.
They go where you have to remember, abusers go where their victims are. If somebody is a narcissistic abuser who wants to mentally control people, they go into psychology and psychiatry because that's where the victims are, right? Good people go into teaching, pedophiles go into teaching. That's where the victims are. So we need to start understanding what the true risks of these things are and why it's so important not to look for outside validation, right? When we give up our power to these experts and we say, well, what's the expert opinion? I'm not an expert, so what does the expert say?
Yeah.
When we do that, we are then putting ourselves at risk of being subjected to the abuse of these people that can be bought. Okay. So we first went to this woman, Catherine Michaels, and in that first session, that woman was like, "Oh, thank God you guys came. And yeah, Brian, actually, you know what? I think you're fine. Lizzy, I think you're bipolar and you need to go on lithium." And I was like, what? Absolutely fucking not. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And then Brian's like, see, you should go. And then he's like, just have sessions with her to prove to me, right? It's this fucking sick and twisted, maniacal form of gaslighting that you don't expect. And again, if you're a good wife and all your husband needs is for you to go and talk to somebody so he feels better about something, why wouldn't you do it? And the answer is because that guy's not looking out for your best interest. Somebody should be teaching you that you are in control of yourself, not that you need to go to somebody else and that person has authority over you, right? And so I fell right into the fucking trap. I started going to this woman just to help Brian feel better, to prove to her that I wasn't crazy. And in one of my first sessions, she said to me, she's like, look, I know you're not crazy, but this is what's really going on. Your husband has a lot of issues to deal with. And do you think he's doing anything nefariously? This is key. She's like, do you think he's doing anything nefariously to hurt you? Like, confronted me straight up. And I was like, no, of course not. He loves me. He's amazing. It's just he's got Stockholm syndrome and he's trying to gaslight me to avoid his own situation. And she's like, exactly. So here's the thing. We have to trick Brian into getting rid of this issue that there's anything wrong with. So we're going to trick him into saying that you know that there's something wrong with you, but you're taking care of it. So that then I can sit down with Brian and say, see, Brian, look, Liz is dealing with her shit. Lizzy's taking care of everything. So now let's talk about you. And I was like, well, that's a crock of shit. But again, if all you have to do is write a letter to your husband that the doctor asked you to write, that means nothing. And you think that's going to help him. Again, like I look back on it and
so they wanted you to admit in writing that you weren't well.
Exactly. But here's the thing. No doctor should ever ask you to say that somebody else has control over you.
Mm-hmm.
So when Dr. Michaels goes against all her ethical guidelines and tells you to put in writing that Brian has control over me, right? That should have been a rude awakening. But again, that was how much I love and trusted him. Okay. And I'm telling my story because when people see and hear me now, they say, oh my God, you're so strong. Oh my God, you're unwavering. And I want them to know I got here because I went through this. Learn from my mistakes. Look at what happened in my life. See how insidious this is. See how they do it. Understand that this is an entire, not only societal norm that protects pedophiles, but it is within our medical system, within our educational system. It is very ingrained, and these people can be procured to gaslight victims.
So what was the consequences in the end for your visits to this lady?
Okay, so what happened was, so in 2013, what she said is, I'm going to give you a prescription. You don't even have to take it, but just keep the bottle around so Brian thinks that you're not well, but that you're being treated, and then I can help treat Brian. And I was like, whatever, fine, okay? So that happened in 2013, and Brian stopped. Like, we kind of subscribed to it. They also, it's so disgusting. Like, now I look back on it and I want to throw up. They literally had me write an apology email to the school to say, I'm so sorry that I mean, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. I was a mother saying that the school had to notify other parents that the children were being sexually solicited on a website. And 4 months later, I'm writing an apology for taking that position. Like, it's just so crazy. But I want you to understand, if you see my strength now and you feel that you're in a position of weakness, I got here quickly. You can get here quickly too. So that happened in 2013. Then Brian eased up on all of us. Then in 2016, when this stuff started popping up again about pedophilia in our family, and it was happening at the kids' school, at the kids' camp, and my husband wasn't advocated, he started bringing this up again. I went to go see Michaels again. She suggested the same thing again. And then after 2016, when Brian wasn't changing and he wasn't going to see anybody and he wasn't really dealing with the shit, I was like, these people are fucking batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I still didn't see his nefarious intent. So I didn't actually I just thought like, oh, that doctor was fucked up and the plan didn't really work, but whatever. but I'm not going back to her ever again. That woman's crazy, right? That she doesn't know what she's doing. That's what I thought. I never put the pieces together that she was for hire, procured services used to gaslight. So now, fast forward, I'm confronting Brian about his pedophilia. We're in the hotel room. This is after he had just called the police on us. So it's important to remember, he initiated the police involvement, okay? Why? Because he had it already set up, but I didn't know that. So he calls the police. I'm confronting him. I'm going through his phone, and I see that he's deleted all evidence of any communications with any of these people that we have been talking to for 7 years, with the exception of 2 letters, 2 emails. My letter to him in 2013 saying that he had control over me, and my letter to him in 2016 saying that he had control over me. And I call him out, I'm reading it, and I'm like, Brian, are you a moron? So you've deleted all communications except letters, which you had to go through thousands of emails from me in order to find these.
Mm-hmm.
So you've deleted everything but kept these? What do you? And I could have at that point deleted them and taken away, but I didn't want to because those letters mean nothing. And I wanted to see what he was planning on doing with him, how deep his delusions were, and what type of psychiatric, sociopathic control he was going to try and use for those things.
And did he try to do something with the letters?
Yes. So then what happened was he then went to this woman, Diana Clark, for O'Connor. He went missing. My husband went missing for 2 weeks. He then went to Diana Clark of O'Connor Professional Group and Cynthia Lang, using a lawyer, Stephen J. Jones, who he himself was just sanctioned in New York courts because he tried to get his own wife falsely committed to a psychiatric facility. Stephen Jones is like this really creepy Boy Scout leader, in our town, and he's a lawyer who's had just awful experiences. Now, again, no divorce action pending, nothing going on. My husband's just missing. We confronted him about his pedophilia. Next thing I know, he starts signing a contract with these people to kidnap me and to get me falsely committed to a mental institution. Okay? He signs contracts. He sends them an email using my name and a list of places to take me. All of this is all posted. He then she then says, okay, here are the inpatient admission forms, and she sends him all of the inpatient admission forms to get me committed. He then puts the $5,000 fee for her services on my credit card.
Yeah, it's like one of those, you've got to laugh or you'll cry. This is crazy.
So then in text, in writing, I'm like, yo, asshole, you're trying to fucking kidnap me? You are hiring people to write contracts to try and falsely commit me against my will? And in writing, he writes back, Lizzy, I would never do that. That would be illegal. And you are of no threat to yourself or others, so I can't do that. So that should give you comfort, Lizzy, from having it from me in writing. But don't you think you're paranoid? Don't you think that's weird that you would think that I would do something so illegal? Don't you think you should go get help for thinking that? And I was like, no, asshole, I'm not paranoid. I have your iPad. I have the contracts. I have the emails back and forth. I have the text exchanges. I have the $5,000 payment on my credit card.
Right.
So that's when he stops all communication with me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Stops the communication with me. And then the next day, I get a $5,000 refund on my credit card.
Right.
So now I call the police and I say, hey, listen, I know I told you that I wanted to deal with this privately and I wanted to give my children headspace to process everything that's happening, and that I asked you to give us some space so that my children weren't having cops in their house and then worried, oh my God, if I tell the truth, what's going to happen to my daddy. Like, I didn't want that mentality. I wanted them to just like, I was like, they're not going to lie. They're not going to manipulate. I will call you and we can sit down and have some time, but just like give them space. But now when he started doing all this, I called the police and I was like, okay, I need to get an order of protection. This man's trying to kidnap me. He's a Yale Law School graduate. He's using these systems like in a very nefarious way, and he's engaging illegally with these people, which would cause him to lose his law license and his partnership at Davis Polk and Wardwell. So he's not thinking clearly. So please come get involved and help me get an order of protection and all this stuff. And the police stonewall. So Lieutenant Boetti, who I call DUI Boetti because he has a DUI, which is driving under the influence, right? He's a criminal, yet we make him chief of our police. And Detective Fred Galbraith protect my husband. They refuse to meet with me. They refuse to meet with my children. He's got an active pedophilia investigation going on now, right? They refuse to take video evidence. They refuse to take testimony. They, when I try and submit all of this information to them, which I do, I give them the paperwork, the contracts and everything. They say, he sounds like a nice guy trying to help you. So then I take it to the district attorney's office, Fred Green and Molly O'Rourke. Now, Fred Green and Molly O'Rourke are part of the domestic violence unit of our district attorney. And Molly O'Rourke deals specifically with child trafficking. And I bring them all of the evidence. And Fred Green says to me, your husband sounds like a nice guy. Why don't you just listen to him? Why don't you just go away for a few days? And I was like, Mr. Green, my husband's missing and undergoing a pedophilia investigation. And you would like me just to disappear for days and go into an inpatient psychiatric unit to relax? Like, what world are you living in that doesn't even make sense? If I was stressed, I'd go get a massage. I wouldn't check myself into a psychiatric facility, you psycho. And then he's like, well, there's nothing illegal here. And I said, Mr. Green, you went to law school, right? And he's like, ha, 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 ha. Yes, I did. And I was like, I'm a district attorney. And I was like, I thought so. So you must be pretty smart if you went to law school. But my husband, Mr. Green, my husband went to Yale. And when a Yale man puts it in writing that it would be illegal for him to do so, I'm going to listen to the Yale man, Mr. Green. And now I see you. And now I know that you are protecting him and that you are refusing to bring any charges against him. And then Molly O'Rourke and Fred Green conspire against me. They start stonewalling. They won't take any evidence of his pedophilia. Next thing I know, the cops show up at my house with an order of protection against me in favor of my husband and the children, while the children are in my sole care. So DSS had been to my house for weeks because of the investigation. So they confirmed that the children were safe. Now, if the children weren't safe, then the children would have had to have been taken out of my care. You understand? Yes. But for weeks, they've been interviewing the kids and nothing. They're like, great, everything's fine, everything's safe. And they would leave the house, right? Now, all of a sudden, I get this order of protection. We go to the courts with my children to say, who were 17, almost 16, and 13 at the time, to say, we don't want to be on this order of protection. My dad's missing under a pedophilia investigation. We are safe with our mother, and we want to stay with our mother. And the courts refuse to hear from my children. That's this judge, Arlene E. Katz, okay? They deny my children access to the court. Now, at 13, I now know that when your children are over 13, they have free will and they can do anything and the courts can't hold them accountable. They want to leave the house and go live with somebody else. The courts can't force them, okay? Unless they prove criminal activity of the person that they're living with, okay? Yeah. So, but I don't know this. So we go to the court, we try and be heard. The court refuses to hear from us and instead says that I have to vacate my home and I have to stay away from my children. Okay, all while my husband is under an active pedophilia investigation. And this is not in dispute. The judge knows this. The judge has evidence from the DSS that says that the children are safe in my care. So next thing I know,
so at that point, your children went to live with your ex-husband?
No. Well, what happened is, no, we're at my house.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're at the house, and all of a sudden, the cops show up at my house, as do all these other people that my husband sends to the house, my quote unquote friends, who I thought were helping me, but they actually came to help abduct my children, but I didn't know that at the time. So Bridget Dale, Laura Warnier, Carla Savoni, and Eric Castillo all showed up at my house to try and quote unquote help me. And there's a video of this, but all they're doing is coercing me to leave my children with the pedophile, right? So the cops show up at my house and they spend 2 hours there. And while they're at the house, and again, I don't let the cops in. The people who Brian invited to the house let the cops in. And again, as per family law, when you're using the cops as a means of harassment towards another parent, that's supposed to really count against you as being a safe parent, right? Like, there was no criminal activity. There was no reason Brian couldn't come into the house and talk to us and say, Lizzy, you have this order. Let's talk about what's going to happen. And the kids get to choose where they're going to go. No, he calls the police because he's a coward. And he knew he couldn't face me. So he calls the police and has the police try and evict me from the home. And they come in for 2 hours, right? But at this point, I was never given an official order by the judge. There was nothing in writing. There was nothing issued. I had signed nothing. I had been served nothing, right? So with the exception of the order of protection that just was like a refrain from, that's like, don't ever hurt your kids. And I was like, well, I've never hurt them. So whatever, okay, right? So anyways, they spend 2 hours at the house. They go back outside to my husband and they say to my husband, sir, this is a refrain from order. The children are safe. Your wife is safe. She's thinking that you're having a breakdown. So we don't know what's going on, but it's Friday night at 6:30 at night and the courts are closed. So why don't you just deal with this on Monday when the courts are open and we'll start afresh. And then at 7:15 on a Friday evening, when the courts had been closed for 2 hours, my husband gets a new judicial order issued by this judge, child trafficker, Arlene Katz, who's not even a judge in our jurisdiction. She's not even in our jurisdiction. She's outside the jurisdiction of our area. He gets this judge to issue a new order, and the cops come in, and I have this all on video. I have the police body cam and my video. They read me the order, and they evict me from my home and from my children who are like holding on to me. My son is like holding, my youngest son is holding his stuffed animal and he's rocking back and forth. Please don't make me go, mommy. Please don't make me go with him. And sorry.
It's okay.
And the cops say to my kids, they lie. These fucking disgusting pedophiles and the pedophile supporters, and they lie to my kids. And they say, if you don't go with your dad, your mom's going to be arrested for kidnapping, and you don't want your mom arrested for kidnapping, do you? And that's why I want people to understand my story, because if we knew the law and we knew that they were lying to us and the kids just got in my car with me and left, there was nothing they could do about it. You understand? But we comply. We comply because we don't understand our rights and we don't advocate for our rights and we don't understand. So I pack a bag. My kids are crying. We talk about how they need to stand up against their father's evil, but not stop believing in his goodness. And try and help Brian realize that he doesn't want to hurt us anymore. And my oldest, down and lock their doors every night. And my oldest says that he'll beat my husband up if he tries anything again, right? Which was the first time that my son actually had broken out of my husband's spell and had really come forward and stood up for himself and for his younger brother and sister, because before he was just underneath my husband's thumb. And all these people who I thought were my friends were standing there and they were like, we're not going to let anything happen to your kids, Lizzy. This is all going to get worked out on Monday. We're going to stay here. We're going to make sure your husband doesn't touch them. We're going to make sure your husband doesn't manipulate them. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. And the cop says to me, Mrs. Weinstein, you know how I just spent 2.5 hours making sure the children were safe in your care? I'm going to do the exact same thing with your husband. We're not going to leave here. I won't let anything happen to them. Do you understand me? And I literally cry and I thank the man. Officer Raphael, I thanked him and I shook his hand. Okay. I then get the police body cam videos. 3 months later, it took me, right? The town wouldn't give them up for the longest time. And this is what happens. I get in my car. I drive. Now, again, let's make it clear. My husband didn't even say that what my husband used to get me evicted was he said that I was writing him too many emails and it caused him to be nervous, anxious, distracted, and fearful. Okay? And that one night when I found out that my husband was at this place, Janssen Palliative Care, and I thought he was going to buy end-of-life drugs, because it's very common for men in their 20s and men in their 40s, when they come to terms with the sexual abuse that they've faced in their life, to commit suicide. And now here was a Yale Law School Davis Polk partner who had been outed for his experience with pedophilia and had been missing for weeks, and now all of a sudden shows up at a palliative care place at midnight on a Sunday. I'm thinking he went there to go buy end-of-life drugs. So I went to go make sure that he wasn't hurting himself. And it turns out that place had not only a palliative care place, but it also had his lawyer's office there. So it was a full setup by him and his lawyer to get me to go to that place to trap me and then file a report that said that I was stalking him. But I wasn't even stalking him, but then I was stalking his lawyer. So none of those things meet the condition for an order of protection, and certainly not a full vacate and stay away order. So this whole thing is bullshit. And here are these people that are then sitting there saying, Lizzy, listen, the court just made a mistake and it's okay, but you should leave. You should leave your house and leave the children and trust the police, Lizzy. But why don't you all stay with us? So everybody that's in this is what's so ridiculous, because now these like trolls are coming after us saying, oh, she's so dangerous. Well, I was so dangerous that all of you invited me to stay in your house with your children? Psychopaths, okay. Like nothing that they say is consistent or makes sense. But anyways.
That wasn't your last experience with the police, was it?
No, but so I just want to tell you that what happened, what actually happened, when as soon as I left the house, on police body cam, all of my friends who were at the house saying, don't worry, we're here to protect you, don't worry, we're like, thank God you got rid of her. Thank God you're here, to the police. She's been acting like this all week. Thank God you're here. Did you get my testimony against her? Oh, you did? Good. All these are supposed to be my best friends, right? Then Brian walks into the house. My kids are in the other room crying. The police greet him at the door. The same ones that said that they would protect my children and make sure that they weren't being abused by this man and would not leave the house if they felt that there was any signs of coercive control or manipulation or gaslighting. Instead, meet him at the door and go, hey, sorry, Mr. Weinstein, that took so long. And he's just standing there like this in a psychotic state, his eyes, and he's like, the children, the children, the children. And they're like, yeah, they're in the other room. See you later. Sorry that took so long. 30 seconds and they fucking walk out of my house. And so then that was June 5th. My children then get taken away from me. They cut off all communications. I immediately file for divorce for my husband on June 6th. I hire 5 lawyers over the course of 8 weeks, spend over hundreds of thousands of dollars, and no lawyer will serve my husband a copy of the divorce or advance any cases against them. They won't submit any evidence to the court of his pedophilia. They just protect, they literally take my money and then go to court and they represent my husband, but pretend they're representing me. So I have to fire all of my lawyers. They won't even get me. It's a court mandated conversation with my children that all of a sudden, like, the lawyer for the children's like, oh, I can't get them available. And like Brian's lawyer's like, oh, we're just not going to respond to her. And my lawyer's like, sorry, nothing we can do. And the judge is like dismissive. So I fire them. I fire my lawyers. I act as a pro se. I start advocating on my own behalf. I get a phone call with my children. And I get an order from the court that says that I can go home with police escort to get my own belongings because I'm homeless. He cuts off all my finances. Now we're multimillionaires. He cuts off my Venmo, my PayPal, all my credit cards. I had frozen my bank accounts because my husband was taking money, siphoning money out of it and using the stolen money to open up new accounts and insisting that the money be in there by June 1st. June 1st was his first day of petitioning the courts. So like, that's just too coincidental.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't paying off the judges, right? It's all right there. So I froze our bank accounts for mutual approval. Again, saying my husband's not going to screw me and I'm not going to screw him. So he would ask for approval to take money out to pay for the mortgages or to pay for, and I would approve it. I would ask for approval to have money for food and gas. And he'd be like, no. So in July, I get a new court order that at least lets me go home because I don't have any of my belongings, right?
I mean, the first interview we did, you were in somebody else's clothes.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I still am. So I go to the police. This was on July 29th. And I ask them to escort me home and I give them the order. Now, at this point, the police have stonewalled the investigation. They've destroyed evidence. They refused to take evidence, and they're just like, go away, go away, go away. So I show up with the new court order, and instead of agreeing to take me home, the police assault me. They physically push me, and they slam the door in my face. So I have the whole thing on video. So then I file against the police. And I file in the police investigatory board in our town. That was on July 29th. On July 30th, the police then come and falsely arrest me. And they say that I'm in violation of this order of protection. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I literally have a video of being in this exact same location 2 weeks ago. And you're telling me, of course, I'm not in violation. And they say, well, we changed our mind. They arrest me in front of my children who were nearby and saw the whole thing, pulled me out of my car, handcuffed me, threw me in the back of a police vehicle, brought me in front of a judge, brought new charges against me, again, which I've never been able to have a trial on, nor have I ever been able to have a trial on the first case that my husband brought against me for the order of protection, okay? So then I was like, okay, now I'm not safe. That was that's when I was like, these people are sick. And they're literally kidnapping and falsely imprisoning me. It's not a false arrest. It's a kidnap when they have no lawful reason to take you, right?
Yeah.
So I, that's in July. I'm advocating. All of my communication with my children get cut off. The judge starts saying that the only way that I can communicate with my children is if I use her family's company as a supervisor. Okay, so Arlene E. Katz, her family is Rick Spitzer is the CEO of this supervising company. And I know you guys have the same programs in England where these supervisors aren't actually there to protect the children. The supervisors are child traffickers. They're handlers. They are there to make sure that the children stay coerced and stay controlled and that you don't say anything, which might help the children snap out of their delusions and advocate for themselves, and to make sure that the children don't provide you of any evidence that can be used against the pedophile. So I'm going to fast forward now a little bit. This is going on for 6 months. I'm left homeless. All my finances are cut off. I filed for motions in divorce court. Judges are assigning me lawyers, saying that I'm mandated to use their lawyers when I'm articulating my arguments clearly myself as a pro se. And then these lawyers are taking positions against me in court, but then the judge won't relieve the lawyers, even though I asked for them to be discharged. The judge is saying, no, they have to stay. So it's just all a hoax. It's just a carnival. It's all a manipulation. There's no real justice in the system.
Yeah.
So in January, on January 4th, I go to the town to file documents to try and get a trial on my hearing, because I've had these charges against me since June of in the family court, and July in the criminal court, which I've never been given a trial on. And instead, the court clerk does not want to take my documents. So without even seeing me, she calls the police and asks them to come up and arrest me. And they use this idea that I'm not wearing a mask for the reason that they're going to arrest me.
Right.
The police come. And again, I want people to look at the video because it's pretty crazy. But the police come up, and within, I think it's 123 seconds, they arrest me. They've got 2 guys slamming me up against a wall. They, again, don't give me a lawyer. They don't let me have an arraignment at all. And they put me in solitary confinement for not wearing a mask. They remand me. The judge then remands me there for 7 weeks. I get out of that experience, and I file a federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York against this judge. And I filed that federal lawsuit on March 8th. And I asked the judge for emergency injunctive relief to be heard, because I say that this judge is planning on hurting me, and I need the court to intervene to stop him from bringing any more false and baseless charges or hurting me further, right?
Of course.
So what's interesting is the federal court files my first motion, files the original case, but it does not file the emergency motion to be heard. Okay, then my case number changes. I then get kidnapped. I'm not joking. I get an email from the town. Hey, Mrs. Weinstein, why don't you come in and pick up some documents? Does this time work for you? And I'm thinking, see, Lizzy, good for you. Like, now, because you stood up for your rights and you were brave enough to file a federal lawsuit, these people are going to start acting lawfully, right?
Yeah.
It was an entire setup. Again, I want you to see the video. You see me in my car, and I'm like, hey, I'm just going to record this because I'm feeling really good. But the last time I felt good, these guys put me in solitary confinement. So I'm going to record this and let's see what happens. And as I walk it, I go up, the building's locked. The policeman then comes. And again, he's a defendant in my case, Detective Fred Galbraith, okay? He's the one that's been hiding my husband's pedophilia, destroying the evidence, like stonewalling, not taking witness testimony, the whole thing. So as I go to walk upstairs, he then jumps me from behind and they kidnap me. They then chain me to a wall.
I've seen this this video. You're handcuffed to a bench. Yeah.
Yep, handcuffed to the wall in the police station. They deny me access to a lawyer. They deny me any witnesses. My friend, because now people know when I'm missing and I'm supposed to go to town, come to the police station because they falsely kidnapped me again. They kidnapped me again, right? So they show up. She shows up and she's recording me through the crack. 2 officers then physically take me and drag me to the judge. And I say, I don't want to go there. You can't make me go in front of a judge without an attorney. They wouldn't even give me legal aid services, right? So they pull me in front of the judge, who's also a defendant in my federal case. And the judge says, Mrs. Weinstein, I'm declaring you incompetent. And I was like, well, that's a whole bunch of horseshit. Because I don't care what you think, Judge Code, and you declare me incompetent, like that I'm unable to represent myself at trial, has nothing to do with you being able to kidnap me. You can't kidnap people off the streets and pull them into a courtroom and declare them incompetent. And he says, Yes, and so I'm dropping all the criminal charges against you, which again, I've never been given a trial on. They were just malicious prosecution brought by the town and by DA David Lauscher, right, to try and get me to stay away from my family and from my children and stop fighting for my kids. And so he's like, I'm dropping all the criminal charges against you, but I'm putting you in jail. It's like, Judge Code, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
You can't put people in jail when they're incompetent. That's the reason why people fake to be incompetent so they get out of going.
Right, yeah.
No sense. So the judge transfers me in jail, and my friend who was at the police station then is told by the police, because they were originally told that she could come into the quote unquote hearing. Then they didn't let her in. Then they say to her, go outside, out front, and when we bring her to the police car, you can talk to her there. Okay? But that's not what they do. She goes around front, and they instead sneak me down through the back and out this back door, and they radio to have the car come up. So she comes running around the corner, recording. You see the ground, and then you see me in handcuffs saying, I'm of sound mind and body. I'm fully competent. I'm of no threat to myself or others. They're transferring me to jail. They won't let me get a lawyer. They're saying that I'm incompetent, and they're sending me to jail. And then the police confirm, yep, she's going to jail, right? So there's no dispute that this is what happened to me. I get transferred to jail. They strip search me. This whole disgusting thing. They intimidate me. They shake me down. There's like 4 or 5 officers on me at all times. Like, oh, you're dangerous. You're in trouble now. Like all this shit. I'm like,
intimidating. And
yes, exactly. Who are you people? So I get locked into a holding cell where I can only call collect. I finally get in touch with a friend who says, where are you? We've been looking for you. I have a lawyer who's coming to help you. I'm like, great. I tell them. And now it says beforehand that all outgoing calls are recorded. So within 90 seconds of me saying where I am and her saying that a lawyer is coming to help me, 4 officers come busting into my cell. And they're like, get up, we're transferring you. And they originally refused to say where they're transferring me. And then they finally acknowledged that they're going to bring me to this place, St. Vincent's Medical Center, which, by the way, is one of the places back in May when my husband paid for people to falsely kidnap me and falsify medical documents. And there's a list of hospitals on there to take me to, is listed as one of the hospitals.
Right.
Okay? I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. So they say they're going to take me there. And again, I'm a Columbia University trained nurse. I'm not really worried about it. They bring me there. They shackle me. They shackle my feet. They shackle my waist, like wrap it in chains, and they shackle my thing. They throw me in the back of a car, and they leave me there. They eventually get in the van a few minutes later. They transfer me over, and I show up, and I say to them, I'm of sound mind and body.
Yeah.
I'm fully competent. I'm not a threat to myself or others. I'm being held against my will in retaliation for filing a federal lawsuit against these defendants. The cops that are here now are county police officers from the Westchester County facility in Valhalla. So they weren't the actual defendants in my case, but they were related people because they had taken custody of me at the same facility in January, right?
Right.
And I say, I demand to speak to my lawyer. I demand to speak to the medical director, and I demand to speak to the patient care representative. And it was Dr. Afobi, Mr. Afobi. No, Dr. Afobi. It was Mohammed Taib, who's a nurse practitioner, and Dr. Weinstein, who was there, as well as I think, but I'm not certain, that the medical director who, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name right now. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyways, they were all there. And Dr. Afobi came over to me and he's like, listen to me. You're not going anywhere. If you're a sound-minded body, then come prove it to us. Why won't you prove it to us? Right? Psychotic, this fucking thing. And he's like, here's what's going to happen. You're coming in here and you are going to be with us for a couple days. And once you prove that you're fine, we'll release you. And if you don't come in here, we're sending you back to jail. You're going to be locked into a private cell for 5 days. And then we're going to transfer you to a state-run mental facility. And I'm thinking, on what charges?
Yeah.
I have no criminal charges. Why are you guys threatening jail? Yes. So I was at this psychiatric facility. I was there from March March 9th through April 2nd. On March 10th, I tried to file something with the Mental Hygiene Legal Services, this woman by the name of Melissa Toothill, who conspired with, I don't know if it was directly with my husband or with the courts, but definitely with the hospital, and would not file the letter, would not assist me in any way, would not file affidavits in my case. The hospital then started, when they realized that I was on the phone and I was speaking with people internationally, were calling from all over the world. I put the phone numbers of the hospital, and the hospital was calling. I mean, they were calling the hospital to try and get in touch with me. The hospital then forbid me from speaking on the phone. Now, again, this is supposed to be a hospital, a therapeutic milieu. They have no right to deny patients the right to speak with their family or friends, and yet they were. And they would say to me, like, if I catch you on the phone, I'm going to put you in a straitjacket in a room where nobody can find you. Like, it was sick and twisted.
Right.
It was twisted. And so I then finally was able to have what's called a release hearing, right? A request for immediate release. So I filed that motion on the 10th. Nothing happened until the 19th. In between then, on my federal case, I mean, it was like literally out of a James Bond movie. I'm handwriting federal motions, sneaking them out by patients who were getting discharged, who were meeting with people to give them these motions, who were then bringing them to the court. Because
so you literally had to like sneak these out to people.
These documents out of the hospital, because they wouldn't let me file documents with the court at all, except through Melissa Toothill, who was somebody who was working on the hospital's behalf. So eventually, they were trying to get me to take medication on my own. They would come in my room with a needle and be like, if you don't take this, we're going to start injecting you while you're sleeping. They would like come in my room at night while I was sound asleep, and they would like rearrange my whole room. They would bring mattresses in, like just anything to screw with it. It was literally Nurse Ratched straight out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And all they cared about was that you get this medication, that they be able to force medication on.
Right.
So there was this doctor, Alejandra Catans, and there was this social worker. Her name is Jill Rosenstein. I'm going to have to look that up. It's on my Facebook page, my Instagram page. And they were also trying to coerce me. And then they were coordinating with my husband. They were like, they literally would put together all of this evidence and said, oh, we know this, and this about you. We know in 2013, you were diagnosed with bipolar. And I was like, no, I wasn't. In 2013, I was gaslit by my husband. I've never been on any medications my whole life. I have never taken medications. I'm not on any medications now, and I'm highly functioning. So what you're talking about is bullshit. And it's against my HIPAA privacy laws for you to be speaking with my husband. I've never given you permission to speak to anybody. So you guys are just lying and making shit up, right?
Yeah.
They didn't care. They didn't care. They're violating all of our laws. So on the 19th, I'm then supposed to have this hearing that to get me released from the hospital. And instead, the hospital files, and I don't get served the case until the 18th, which is important because that's improper service. You can't you can't give somebody all new cases to be heard in less than 18 hours away without giving them a chance to respond, right? So the hospital files for a medication over objection hearing, okay? And lo and behold, who is the judge? But the same judge who protected Howard Code the first time I was falsely imprisoned, this woman, Ann E. Minahan. And at that time, she had a bail hearing when misdemeanors don't require bail. So when I was falsely imprisoned, she had a bail hearing to get me out of prison. When misdemeanors, so it should have been like, yes, she's released. That's it. There's no hearing. She's not supposed to be held on bail. Why is this woman in jail? But that's not what she did, right? So now that same judge, that same corrupt judge shows up again. And she's not even, there's a very specific list of judges that oversee these mental hygiene legal services conferences, and she's not on that list. So what is she doing on my case, right?
Right.
So they hold a medication over objection hearing. I have witnesses who I have medical testimony from my doctor of 18 years who says Mrs. Weinstein is not suicidal or homicidal in any way, which is the only means by which they can keep you against your will. Okay. I've known her for 18 years. I just had a televisit with her. She's not suicidal or homicidal. I then have patients who got discharged who are also being held against their will, right? Say everything that this doctor is saying is ridiculous. That doctor's never seen Lizzy. She literally could not have been more helpful to the patient. And the nurses and the doctors the entire time were coercing us and trying to force medications against our will. And Lizzy was calm. She was collected. She'd advocated. She slept well every single night. None of what you guys are falsely asserting is true. Okay, so we have that all on record. Then I have Dr. Katan on the stand, and I say, Dr. Katan, isn't it true you have never evaluated me? And she's like, yes, that's true. How am I supposed to evaluate you when you won't let me? Okay, so I've been in this hospital for 2 weeks. They have no evidence to use against me. They have falsified documents from a doctor saying that she's, who then goes on to the stand to say that she's never been allowed to see me in 2 weeks. But she's insistent that I have paranoid schizophrenia, right? Which is great because it's so ridiculous. I have paranoid schizophrenia and I have severe bipolar disorder, and that I'm in a manic state and that I'm going to be depressed any second. So they have to help save my life and put me on medication. And this judge, who is a related judge in my federal case that I have already filed, so she should be conflicted out and not even allowed to preside over a case. You understand?
Yeah.
Then prescribes me medication over objection. And it is like a frontal lobotomy. She prescribes me enough medication to kill a 250-pound man. I am a 110-pound to 115-pound, 49-year-old woman who has never been on any medications my whole life. And they suddenly prescribe me lithium, Depakote, Zyprexa, Ativan, Haldol injections. And now if a normal prescription for somebody who did need that medication, who was my age and was my weight, would be maybe 100 milligrams, they were prescribing me 1,500 milligrams, right? Like way outside appropriate standard practice of care.
Right.
And they did it. This is what I want you to understand. They did it and they got away with it. And so every day I had to take this medication.
What was that doing to you? What was the medication? What did it make you feel like?
Well, it's interesting. So these medications, when I say it's meant to give you a frontal lobotomy, it's exactly that. Like lithium is a very heavy metal, and it disconnects your thinking, and it disconnects you from your pineal gland and from your intuition and from your understanding of things around you. Okay.
Yeah. Your connection to source.
Exactly. But beyond that, even like Benadryl, we all know sometimes you can take Benadryl on a plane to make you sleepy. Everything was designed to depress you, to make you controlled, to make you lethargic, to make you unable to think. Okay.
Right.
So I said to myself this: I believe everything is happening to me for a reason. I believe all of this is happening because I am that bitch. Like I am the one that's going to shine light on this, and I'm going to take it all down. So in my scariest moments, like when I was locked in solitary confinement and nobody knew where I was, and there were 5 guards outside, and they're talking about doing inappropriate things to me, and there's nothing that I can do about it because I'm locked in a jail cell with a metal door that they control. And when I'm in this place, in a mental hospital, being forced medications against my will, I then went back to my strength. And I said, okay, Lizzy, listen, you know they're doing this to you, not because you're crazy, but they're trying to make you go crazy. So number one, that's the last fucking thing you're going to do. You're going to wake up every day. You're going to be a good person. And not only are you going to be a good person, you're not even going to be angry towards them. You're going to show them compassion and love. And that's where your strength is going to come in, number one. And number two, I don't know how the body does everything. Like, how the freak did my body build an eyeball? I don't know, but it did. So my body can do amazing things. And my body can take a placebo and turn that into a cure for cancer, if I believe that it can. We know that that happens, right? People, there's a reason that we have the placebo effect. People believe that something's working, and then that sugar pill magically does what it's supposed to, what the person believes it to be. So I then said, okay, body, if you can take a pill that's water and sugar and you can make it cure cancer, then you can take a pill that's meant to destroy me and you can poop it out. Poop it out. Just don't let it absorb into your system. Just don't let it cross the blood-brain barrier. Whatever that pill is meant to do, that pill is a Fraxel. And I am source. I am light and love. And there's nothing stronger. So I'm just going to meditate every day on this. And I'm going to say, I don't know how the hell you're going to do it, body, but make this thing just go straight through me.
Right. And you have people there making sure that you take this medication.
Oh, yeah. They stand over you. You have to take it. They check your mouth. Like, yeah. So every single day I had to take this medication for 2 weeks. And I would wake up every day and I would see this sick doctor who was the one prescribing all this shit against me. And I'd say, Dr. Katan, I see you're evil, but I still believe in your goodness. And she'd be like, are you threatening me? You're threatening me. I was like, how can they tell you that I believe in your goodness be threatening you? And she'd say, well, I'm doing things to hurt you. I mean, I'm giving you medication to help you and you don't like it. And you're still saying that you believe in my goodness. What does that mean? And I go, it means that I think that you are being controlled by a dark, stupid, evil demon that you have allowed to function in your body. Mm-hmm. But I believe that you are a human being, and deep inside you, you have a piece of soul. And that soul, as tiny as it is, because you have withered it away and not turned to your soul, and you have done this evil in your life, that tiny bit of soul is stronger than that massive demon that's running amok in your body right now. That's what that means, Dr. Katan. And she was like, they didn't know what to do with me. And all the nurses and the doctors would be like, I'm just doing my job. And I was like, well, your job is kidnapping and poisoning people then.
Yeah. So this was the April just gone, right? Because you completely disappeared from social media. I couldn't myself get hold of you, and I found out that you were in a psychiatric unit. And I had to wait for you to get out to find out what had really gone on. And this is the first time myself that I'm hearing this entire story. So at what point did you realize that you were getting out, and how did you manage to get out of this situation?
It's actually interesting because the truth of the matter is, I don't know what worked. So what happened originally is that I was able to get on, a friend of mine copied my recordings, my phone recordings, and posted them on Instagram with the phone numbers to reach me at the hospital. Mm-hmm. And people started calling from all over the world. But then by the time it got to you and you started calling, the hospital refused to let me speak on the phone anymore. Then the hospital literally then what was happening is the patients were answering the phone, right? And they would be like, she needs help. This place is crazy. And they kidnapped her. And the nurses would come over and hang up the phone on the patients and say, don't help her. And if you do, you're going to get medication too. It was sick. So then the hospital built a wall around the phones to stop us to getting to the phones. Right. And they kept saying, I had Dean Harlan is the medical director. Dean Harlan. So Dean Harlan came upstairs to the unit and he said to me, Mrs. Weinstein, you are never going to be able to leave here. I am going to keep increasing your medication until you are so out of it that if you ever do get to leave here, you are going to need a guardian over you. So stop trying. Do you hear me? And I was like, how about a no? How about a no? So they were smart enough that they knew they had to give me some contact, because if they didn't legally, if they don't let you have these 2 phone calls a day, then they could be arrested and the whole facility shut down.
Yeah.
So I was only allowed 2 phone calls a day for 5 minutes. During those times, I was constantly getting in touch with other people who I knew understood the situation. And then those people were contacting the courts, contacting the CEO, contacting and at some point, I think the hospital was like, crap, like, she's not going to stop fighting.
She's not going to stop.
Waking up every day doing yoga. There's too many people that now know about it because this hospital had kidnapped other women who were fine, who had no psychiatric ideations, and those people were then eventually getting dismissed, and then they were going out and talking about it. So if you were to ask me, I think the hospital just got to the point where they were like, we better let her out.
Right.
I don't know why, but they eventually said, okay, listen, we're going to discharge you to outpatient care. And I said, I don't need outpatient care. And I don't give you any authority to release my personal and private medical information to anybody. They did it anyway. They set up this whole outpatient system, right? And this visit. And the sick part about it is at one point, I had this woman, Maria Payon, who was helping me, okay? And she was acting as a patient care advocate. And she was recording all of these phone conversations that I was having. And during one phone conversation with Jill Rosenberg, I think that's her name, Jill Rosenberg, we were having a discharge meeting, and Jill Rosenberg in the meeting was like, oh, I have to call my boss, Marco. And instead, you hear her calling the Briarcliff Manor Police, who are the defendants in my federal case.
Right.
Hey, I've got an issue with Elizabeth Harding Weinstein, Marco. And they're like, Briarcliff Manor Police, can I help you? And she's like, hey, Marco, I've got an issue with Elizabeth Harding Weinstein. Marco, can you help people? Can you help me with Elizabeth Harding Weinstein? Marco, because you're my boss, Marco, right? It's fucking crazy, but we have the whole thing on recording, okay? So she posts that video. Next thing I know, Marco gets in touch with Maria. Maria takes down all the recordings and stops contacting me, stops advocating for me. It was crazy. So to this day, she still won't give me copies of the recording. I've sent her a Dropbox like, hey, this is serious. Like, these people are still trying to hurt me. Can you please at least give me the evidence that we went through? And she's like, oh, I'm a little busy. I'll get it to you soon. And I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate everything that you did for me. That was amazing and wonderful. But Maria, what are you doing?
Right.
Did you get paid? What did they say to you? Did they come after you? Like, what's really going on? You're not fooling me here. So eventually I then filed another motion to be released, and they were pushing to have me cooperate with an outpatient discharge, and they would let me go to prevent me from having another hearing. Whatever.
Okay.
Long story short, I get out. That was on April 2nd. Then on April 6th, the federal judge, who had since changed while I was in there, out of nowhere, the judge that was on my case leaves my case and a new judge comes on by the name of Kathy Seibel, then issues an order that says, oh, Mrs. Weinstein asked to be immediately released from a psychiatric facility, which she denied, okay? She denied it. But because she asked to be immediately released, Mrs. Weinstein brought to this court the issue of her incompetency. So she's asking us to find out whether or not she's competent. So I'm going to make a decision about Mrs. Weinstein's competency. No. Like when you go to the judge and you say, my car got stolen, the judge doesn't say, well, you just brought your issue of car ownership to this court. And we don't know if you're a competent car owner. No, that's not what happens, right? And you denied my motion to be heard. So this is all just corruption all the way up to our federal courts. And this is in the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York is a very influential federal court throughout our country. And we've got corruption. We've got a judge having ex parte communications with the other side. We've got a judge trying to hold say that she's going to make a determination of my competency while she's approving my motions, my other motions, right?
Right.
So like, if I'm competent enough to learn how to file federal motions,
Yeah.
and a 1983 case, and you're accepting the case and we're proceeding with the case, my competency is self-evident, Judge, as is your corruption, Judge Kathy Seibel. So this is where I am right now. This is April 6th. This judge is now trying to declare me incompetent. She's taking ex parte communications, which is one-sided communications from the other side. So they're submitting information to her that I'm never served, I'm never allowed to see. My files aren't being served on my case, right? So when I submit something into the case and I'll get a confirmation of filing, then I go into the case and I find out they never actually filed it, right? It's fucked up. It's so messed up. And so when we all say, oh, well, they're violating our rights and they're doing this and we're going to sue them, we have to consider if it is the judiciary that is the root cause of all these problems. It doesn't matter if you go to get accountability through the courts, and the courts are the ones that are going to put you in a psychiatric facility, that are going to falsely declare you incompetent, that are going to take away your children, your liberty, your home, your belonging, your finances. We're living under tyrannical rule, and it comes from our judiciary. These judges are not what we believe them to be. They are human trafficking and human extortion done by our government. And we pay for them to do it.
Of course, yeah.
So the main issue that I'm attacking right now is trying to educate people about my story so that they can prepare themselves. Because one of the things that happens when you get taken against your will, they confiscate your phone. So you're allowed a phone call, but do you know the number of the person that you're calling? Do you have a plan set up? Do they know who to call? You only get one phone call, right? So you need to make a plan with people. Find out who your point of contact is. Memorize their phone number. Make a plan. This is what, if I get taken against my will for speaking out, these are the people you should contact. These are the platforms that you should post my story on. Make sure that you have a platform where multiple people have access to be able to upload information. Educate yourself about your laws in your area so that when they do take you, when you speak up and you show yourself to be competent and capable and knowledgeable about your rights, perhaps they're not going to take you, okay? So that's really important to understand how to protect yourself. But also, I need people to understand that this issue of judicial immunity is called an emolument of judicial immunity, which says that a judge can't be held accountable for their actions because they need to have immunity in order to be able to truly do their job properly, okay? Well, if a judge can declare you incompetent, throw you in prison without ever having seen you, take away your children, take away your belongings, take away your home, take away all your mail, take away your dog, and there's no consequence for that judge, then that is tyrannical rule. So that is why we need to have an awareness around the fully detrimental effects of judicial immunity. And as a humanity, we need to stand up and rise up against it and get educated. So I have in my Instagram post a petition.
I was just about to ask, how can we now support you? Everybody who watches this today, I'm sure you're going to have touched a lot of hearts with your story, and there's going to be a lot of people that want to help and support you going forward. So, yeah, how can we do that?
Great. Well, the first and foremost thing is, for me personally, signing my petition, sharing the arrest videos, because again, I don't want people just to know the story. I want them to see the evidence. The evidence speaks for itself. So all of my arrest videos themselves are in, if you go on Instagram, they are in like the saved stories up at the top, those like 5 little circles. I put the ones that are really important.
Your highlights.
Take you to the original videos, okay? But it's also in the petition. I have the major stories of the arrests and stuff that are in there as well, okay? Get in contact with me. I freely give out my email and my cell phone number. My email is Liz Harding, LIZZHARDING1 @Mac, MAC, like Mother Apple Computer.com. Okay. LizHarding1@mac.com. Email me and I will email you a summary of everything with all the evidence and clear links. So you can just go through and start clicking on things and it'll help you. Okay. Getting the story out is important because people need to know that this isn't just my story. People need to understand that they are arresting people and kidnapping them for very little plausible deniability, okay? It used to be that they needed clear and convincing evidence to take control over you and to prosecute you in any way. Now, they are looking for almost no plausible deniability with which to say that they can take control over you. Okay,
Right.
So that's specific to me. Signing my petition, sharing the petition, and then starting to get those videos to go viral. That is specific to me. That is really important. What's specific to you? Educate yourself about what's going on in your area. Understand that they need our compliance, okay? Compliance with these mass mandates are compliance with human rights violations. Compliance with these any of this, like the vaccinations or any type of controlling situation by our government, which all goes against our international laws and the Nuremberg Code. Any compliance with them helps them. The idea that as soon as I give up my rights and we're all compliant with that, the sooner I'll get them back.
Of course.
It's just not how
it
works. So learn about the laws, learn about the rights, stop being compliant, make a plan. Make a plan for yourself. Memorize people's phone numbers. Make a backup plan as to who you would call, how they would help you, and who they should contact. And get the word out. These people hide in plain view. They hide in plain view so that when we shine a bright light on them, and there's a truth that resonates around what they're really doing, they've got no place left to go. They've got no place left to go. So the biggest thing that they fear is the truth. And it's really weird because I've had people all over the world contact me about that video, but it says I've only gotten 2,000 views. So I don't know if they're manipulating the views or not, but I want people to understand that it doesn't matter. Don't look at the number. Look at the value that you see in sharing those videos. You understand? And when you're telling your story, don't care about the number, even if it says you only have one viewer. Can you trust that your story needs to get out? Can you trust that it's going to have a ripple effect? Can you trust that the one person that's hearing it is the person that needs to hear it, even if it is only one, which it probably isn't. It's probably a multiple of tens of that. But just get the stories out. Start speaking the truth. Don't believe anything blindly. Do your own research. The truth does not mind being questioned, but a lie hates being challenged.
Of course. And on that note, Lizzy, I'd like to thank you for forever strongly standing in your truth and the incredible fight that you not only put up for your children and yourself, but the rights of other people as well and other people's children. So it's very, very special. You're a very special lady, and you have my full support this whole way through. And I and plenty of others are praying for you and your kids and the safety of your kids. And I want to thank you again for being so open and honest in this interview, and so transparent and so strong. And if ever you need anything from me, I'm always going to be here for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, this isn't just my story. This is happening all throughout the world. And I know you know stories, right, of Samantha that's happening to her.
Here in the UK.
In the UK. And there's people in Canada. They are kidnapping humans. And they are doing it by police. They're doing it using these mask mandates. They're doing it by the courts. They're trafficking children to pedophiles. And this has been going on for decades. But now, under this guise of COVID, it's happening at a fever pitch. So pay attention, get involved. I mean, again, signing my petition and everything is so important. But find out, contact me, contact Alexa Rose. We know of other people that could use your help in your area, and get involved. And let's all stand up together. I know in my heart of hearts that we win this war in the end. I know we do. But what I don't know is how much pain and how much suffering we're going to need to go to until we all stand up as a humanity and realize that we are all united in this. And injustice for one is injustice for all. We all know that. But it's not, the more you turn a blind eye to this, the longer it's going to go on and the more pain you're going to have to face. I'm not going to save you. Alexa Rose isn't going to save you. Nobody is coming to save you. You are going to save yourself. But everybody needs to take that position and get involved and be a good human. And then we will move together towards a better humanity.
Very wise words, Lizzy, as always. Thank you.
Thanks, babe. Love you so much. Thank you
And
for
you.
covering the story.
Always. Bye everyone.